The mail-order bride thought no one wanted her until a little girl whispered, "Can you be my mommy forever?" Montana Territory, late autumn, 1883. The train whistle had long faded into the distance. But Clara Ray remained on the platform. Her gloved hands clutched a worn carpet bag, and her breath misted in the crisp air. Dust swirled at her boots as the last passengers disappeared down the path to town, welcomed by families or greeted by merchants. None had come for her. Again, Clara sat down on a bench carved rough and cold, her spine rigid with the weight of humiliation. She pulled a letter from her coat, creased, soft at the edges, read too many times. She had memorized every line, every promise, scribbled by the man who had written as Harland Colton. "I've a quiet home, a warm hearth, and a place for a kind soul to belong." But no one came. No Harland, no wagon, no invitation, only silence. From a distance, two young men leaned against a barrel, grinning behind their hands. One of them laughed aloud. "There she is, the half-blood bookkeeper. Thought she'd marry herself a rancher, did she?" Clara flinched. It wasn't the first time. She had been turned away at the altar, twice in public, once in private. Each time, the truth rose like bile in their throats. "She's part savage, you know. Her mother didn't choose her father. She was taken. That blood runs deep." And even when Clara had opened a small library out near Fort Union, the whispers still followed. Half-blood orphan, raised by Injuns, untouchable. Tears welled up, hot against the cold wind. She lowered her head, shoulders curling in. She hadn't cried in front of anyone in years. But now she wept quietly, hopelessly, the letter crumpling in her lap. Small footsteps tapped closer. Then a child's voice, bright and clear. "Are you hurt?" Clara looked up. A girl, no older than 3, stood before her, eyes wide with concern. She wore a too large wool coat and mittens that hung from a string around her neck. Golden curls peeked out from beneath a knit cap. Clara wiped at her face with her sleeve. "No, I'm just—" She stopped, tried to smile. "Just a little sad." The girl studied her seriously. "Did your daddy say no?" Clara blinked. "No, sweetheart." The girl tilted her head. "Do you have a husband?" Clara shook her head. The girl tried again. "Do you have a baby?" Another small shake. Clara managed. "Nobody wants me." The child stepped closer. Her mittened hand reached out, touched Clara's gloved fingers. And then, with a certainty only a child could carry, she asked, "Can you be my mommy forever?" Clara froze. A soft voice spoke behind them. "Junie." Clara looked up. A man had approached, quiet on his feet, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, and older than her by a few years. His coat was patched, his hat worn from long rides. He had the rough look of someone who had lived through too much and said too little. In one arm, he carried a small sack of supplies. His other hand rested lightly on the child's shoulder. He nodded toward Clara. "Sorry, she's got a soft heart." Clara stood quickly, brushing her skirt. "No trouble, she just surprised me." The man's eyes lingered on the crumpled letter in Clara's hand. "You waiting on someone?" Clara hesitated. "I was. But it seems I've been fooled again." He nodded slowly, then looked down at the girl. Junie tugged his coat. "She cried, Papa." His jaw tensed. He looked back at Clara. "You've got no place to stay." "No," she said, "but I'll manage." He stared a moment longer, then shifted the sack to his other hand. "It's cold. If you want a roof and some warm broth, you're welcome to rest a while." Clara blinked. "I don't even know your name." "Luke," he said. "Luke Harrison." He gestured to the path. "It's not far. You can leave after supper if you still want to." Clara looked down at Junie, who still held her hand. Then she nodded. "Thank you." And just like that, she followed the man and his daughter into the cold Montana dusk. Not with hope, but with the tiniest flicker of warmth, like a match lit in the wind. The path to Luke Harrison's cabin wound through thin pine and broken hills. The sky had dimmed to violet by the time they reached it. Nestled in a hollow, the house was small. One room, a low porch, smoke curling from a narrow chimney. Clara hesitated at the threshold. Junie pulled her hand gently. "It's warm inside," she whispered. Luke opened the door without a word. The fire was already crackling, casting long shadows on the rough plank walls. A single bed sat against the far corner, a small table, a rocking chair. Sparse, but clean. "You can hang your coat there," Luke said, gesturing to a hook by the door. Clara hesitated again. "I won't stay long." Luke didn't look up from where he removed his boots. "That's up to you. But I did not invite you here to stay forever, just the night." Clara's cheeks flushed. "I appreciate your honesty." He moved to the hearth, stirred the stew pot. "And for the record, I did not write you any letters." Clara blinked. "You're not Harlan Colton." Luke huffed a dry sound, somewhere between a laugh and a grunt. "Harlan Colton is a 16-year-old who cleans stables for me sometimes, likes to play matchmaker with strangers' mail, likely thought it was a joke." Clara stared at the floor, her hands clenched around the carpetbag strap. "I see," she said quietly. Junie, sensing the tension, climbed onto the bench near the fire and patted the seat beside her. "You can sit here," she said. "It's warmest." Clara sat. She didn't remove her gloves. They ate in near silence. Luke said little. Clara said less. Only Junie, with her cheerful humming and slurping, seemed untouched by the awkwardness. After supper, Clara stood. "Thank you for the meal. I should go." But before she could reach the door, Junie slipped from her seat and latched onto her skirts. "No," the child cried. "You said you didn't have a house. This is one." Clara bent down gently. "Sweetheart, this isn't my house." Junie's lip trembled. "It can be, just for a little." Clara glanced at Luke, unsure what to say. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "She gets attached fast," he muttered. "I'll sleep in the barn," Clara said, "or by the hearth, just for tonight." Luke didn't answer right away. Then he nodded. "You can take the cot. I'll stay up." Clara looked around, and that's when she saw it. In the corner, tucked behind a stack of folded blankets, hung a small dress, beaded, handmade, the kind worn by native girls. Beside it, a low wooden shelf, carved with careful hands, held a few items: a feather, a string of turquoise, a small pouch of dried sage. Clara stepped closer. "She was Comanche," she said softly. Luke's voice came from behind her. "Kiowa." Clara turned. He didn't flinch. "She died during the frost last year. Fever took her fast." Clara's heart pulled tight. "I'm sorry," she said. Luke gave no reply, only added another log to the fire. Later, when Junie had drifted to sleep, curled beside the dog, Clara sat by the window with a blanket around her shoulders. Luke spoke from across the room. "You can stay, just for a few days. She's calm when you're here." Clara looked toward him. "That's all right. I won't ask for more." He nodded once, then went back to his chair. Neither spoke again that night. But the fire burned low, and the cabin no longer felt like a place meant for one. It began with a shiver. Junie, who had danced barefoot in the meadow that morning, now lay curled on the cot, her skin flushed and damp. By nightfall, her breaths came in shallow gasps, her body trembling beneath the quilt. Luke hovered beside her, eyes wide with panic. His hands, usually so steady with hammer or rifle, now shook as he tried to press a wet cloth to her burning forehead. "She's burning up," he muttered. "I do not know what's wrong." Clara had been sorting herbs by the hearth when she heard the strain in his voice. She stood quickly, crossing the room. "What happened?" "She was fine this morning," Luke said. "Just a sniffle. Then she got quiet. Too quiet." Clara placed her hand on Junie's cheek. The heat pulsed through the skin like fire under thin ice. "She has a fever," Clara said calmly. "A bad one." Luke's mouth tightened. "Can we take her to town?" "Not tonight. Roads are frozen, and she won't last the trip." Luke stood, pacing. "I do not know what to do." Clara touched his arm. "I do." He looked at her, surprised. "My father," she said, "was a Kiowa medicine man. He taught me things that work when nothing else does." Luke hesitated, then nodded. "Once." Clara moved quickly. She reached into her satchel, pulled out dried roots and bundles of wrapped leaves. She boiled water, steeped the herbs, crushed others into a thick paste. She worked without pause, without fear, her movements swift and sure. Luke watched from the corner, arms crossed but tense. "She is just a child," Clara murmured, as she placed the herbal cloth on Junie's chest. "But she burns like she's carrying the world." "She's all I have," Luke said hoarsely. Clara did not answer. She kept working. She lifted Junie's head, coaxed her lips open, and dripped bitter tea slowly past her tongue. The girl whimpered, but swallowed. "She needs to sweat it out," Clara said. "If she does, she'll break the fever before morning." The room settled into quiet, save for the crackle of fire and the occasional moan from the cot. Luke sat on a stool, elbows on knees, eyes never leaving his daughter. "You have done this before?" he asked softly. Clara nodded. "Twice. One boy had croup so bad he couldn't breathe. The other had a fever after a winter hunt. He lived." Luke's jaw twitched. "You sound more sure than most doctors." "I had to be," she said simply. "Where I grew up, nobody came for us when we got sick." He studied her face, her calm, her certainty, the gentleness in her hands. And something inside him shifted. He was not used to this, being helped, being watched over. He had always been the one guarding the edges, shielding from pain. But tonight, it was Clara who stood between death and his daughter. She wiped Junie's forehead with soft cloth, replaced the compress, fed more tea, whispered lullabies in a language Luke did not know. Sometime past midnight, the child stirred. Her cheeks were still flushed, but her breath no longer rasped. She opened her eyes. "Mommy," she whispered. Clara froze. Luke inhaled sharply. Junie reached out, fingers fumbling until they found Clara's hand. She gripped it tightly, then drifted back into sleep. Clara looked at Luke, lips parted. She does not understand," Clara said quietly. Luke's face was unreadable in the firelight, but his voice, when it came, was low. "She knows what feels safe." They sat in silence. Outside, frost clung to the windows. Inside, the girl slept, her hand in Clara's. And Luke watched them both as if seeing a dream too fragile to speak aloud. He did not say thank you. But in the morning, when Clara woke, stiff by the hearth, she found a cup of coffee waiting on the table. Hot, fresh, and poured just for her. The stars outside blinked cold and clear, scattered across the Montana sky like scattered embers. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low, casting long shadows across the wooden walls. Clara sat on the porch step, shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders, mug of warm tea in her hands. The night was quiet. Junie had fallen asleep hours ago, curled in the nest of quilts Clara had stitched back together. Luke stood at the far end of the porch, arms crossed, eyes trained on the tree line. For a long while, neither of them spoke. Then Clara broke the silence. "She asked me again tonight," she said. Luke turned. "Junie?" Clara nodded. "She wanted to know if I had a mommy. I told her I did once, a woman who held my hand when I cried, who sang to the stars like they were her sisters." Luke leaned against the railing. "Your real mother?" "No," Clara said softly. "The woman who gave birth to me died the night I was born." Luke's brow furrowed. "My mother was Kiowa," Clara said. "My father was a cavalry officer." She sipped the tea. Her voice did not shake. It was too used to the telling. "She was taken during a raid, left pregnant. Some say he meant to come back. Others say he was drunk. I do not remember him, and I do not want to." Luke was quiet. "The tribe took me in. Not all of them agreed. But one old woman raised me like I was her own. I learned to read before I could ride." Learn to mix herbs, sew moccasins, tell stories to children. She smiled faintly. But I never stopped being what they whispered. Half-blood, bastard child. A reminder. Luke sat down on the other end of the step. When I was 17, a trader passed through. Said I was too pretty for teepees. He took me to a town west of here, promised to help me find work, a life. Clara's fingers tightened around the mug. The first man I got engaged to was a preacher's son. We were going to marry in spring. Then he found out. What did he say? He didn't say anything, just stopped showing up. Sent his brother to tell me the wedding was off. Luke said nothing. The second wrote me letters, promised a ranch, a family, but when I arrived, he wouldn't even open the door. His mother came out and said he'd changed his mind. Clara stared out into the darkness. The third one actually stood at the altar with me, said the vows, put the ring on my finger. Luke looked at her, eyes narrowing. He left me that night, said he could not sleep beside a woman who had blood of savages. The words hung in the air like smoke. I stopped trying after that, Clara said. Just kept to myself, worked in the library, read stories to other people's children. She glanced down, until I filled out that form. Mail order bride. Seemed foolish, but I thought, maybe someone out there would see past the past. Luke looked at her long and quiet. I didn't write you, he said finally. Clara gave a half smile. I know. They sat in silence. Then Luke spoke, voice low. I knew a man once who said blood tells the truth of a person. Clara glanced sideways. You believe that? I did, Luke said. Then I had a daughter with skin darker than mine, and the world told me she was less than whole. He looked at Clara. She's the best thing I've ever done. His words were simple, but they stayed with her. And in the hush that followed, Clara breathed a little easier. For the first time in her life, she did not feel like she had to explain who she was. She just was. And someone listened. The fire had burned low by the time Luke returned from checking the traps. Snow clung to his boots in wet clumps, and his shoulders were dusted in white, like time had settled there. Clara was by the hearth, stitching a patch on one of Junie's dresses, her brow furrowed in focus. She looked up when he entered. You found anything? Rabbit, he muttered, shrugging off his coat. Small one. He didn't meet her eyes as he hung the coat, but he didn't have to. Clara could feel something different about him tonight. Less guarded, more brittle. She set the needle down. You all right? Luke hesitated, then crossed to the table, poured himself a cup of water, and stood staring out the window into the dark. She used to sing when the snow came, he said. Clara turned. My wife, he added, voice quiet, Lita's mother. Clara said nothing, just listened. She was Comanche. Her name was Weena. It meant quiet moon. She had eyes that laughed at me even when her mouth didn't. He sipped the water but did not turn around. We met when I was 22. I was bleeding from a bullet wound and half out of my mind. She found me near the river, nursed me through fever. A soft smile ghosted across his face, but it did not stay. She spoke little English, I spoke no Comanche, but somehow we built a life. Clara's fingers curled on her lap. When I brought her back to town, they stared, whispered, told me she'd put a spell on me, that our child wouldn't belong to God. He finally turned. His eyes looked older than they should. From winter I went out to find supplies. Took me 3 nights. He sat down, hard, like the weight of that memory pressed him down even now. When I came back, the door was open, snow inside, Junie crying under the table. Clara felt her breath catch. They'd come while I was gone. Burned the blankets, tore the dolls, took Weena outside. His jaw locked. Said she was infecting the bloodline. Silence stretched like a blade. I buried her beneath the cedar tree. Told myself I'd raise Junie quiet, alone, so no one could take anything else from me. His voice dropped. I didn't stop loving her, but I stopped choosing love. I chose survival. Clara sat still, her hands clenched. I understand, she whispered. Luke looked at her. I didn't come here to fall in love either, Clara said. I just wanted a place where I wouldn't have to say sorry for still being alive. They looked at each other for a long moment. Nothing romantic passed between them. No brush of fingers, no sudden declarations. Only the simple, raw understanding of two people who had survived being unwanted, who had chosen silence over hope for too long. She would have liked you, Luke said after a moment. Clara smiled faintly. She made a beautiful daughter. She was the strongest woman I ever met, Luke said. Clara looked at the patched dress in her lap. Then I'll make sure her daughter grows up knowing that. Junie stirred in the next room, murmured something in her sleep. Luke stood, crossed toward the door, paused, and turned back. You don't have to stay. I know. But if you do, he said, you won't owe me anything. I'm not here to be owed, Clara replied. I'm just here. Another silence. But this one didn't ache. It settled around them like a blanket, thick with unsaid things, but warm with something like peace. They would not say love. Not yet. But something had begun to grow in the quiet between stories, and neither of them would walk away this time. The wind had shifted by mid-afternoon, colder, sharper, a whisper of snow in its teeth. Clara had just finished hanging a blanket to dry when she realized the yard was too quiet. Junie? No answer. She dropped the blanket, eyes scanning the field. The gate near the tree line stood open. Panic clawed up her throat. She ran, boots pounding across frozen ground, calling the child's name. Junie! She found the little footprints by the stream first, then the red ribbon snagged on a thorn bush, and then a splash, a scream. Help! Clara's heart stopped. Down by the edge of the creek, Junie flailed in the ice-cold water, swept by the current. Her small hands grasped for a branch, slipping. Hold on! Clara yelled, already tearing off her coat, not thinking, only moving. The water was a blade of winter. It stabbed through her skin, her chest, her spine. She gasped, but kept going, her boots anchoring in mud as she reached for Junie. Come here, sweetheart. I've got you. Junie sobbed, clinging, as Clara grabbed her under the arms, heaving her toward a half-submerged rock. She pushed the child up with every bit of strength she had left. Stay here, hold tight. Junie clutched the rock, trembling. But Clara, her foot caught between two underwater stones, could not pull free. She tried, pulled, kicked, but the pain shot through her ankle, up her leg. Her arms burned from the cold, her breath came in ragged gasps. The last thing she saw was Junie's face, pale and wet, eyes wide with terror. Then the world went dark. Luke heard the scream just as he reached the cabin. He dropped the bag of feed and ran, no coat, no weapon, only instinct and dread. He followed the trail, his boots crushing the snow. Then he saw her, Junie sobbing on the rock, Clara floating limp in the stream. He waded in without a word, the water up to his thighs, arms burning. He grabbed Clara first, pulled her against him, then reached for Junie. It's okay, he murmured. I've got you. I've got you both. The fire roared high that night. Luke wrapped Clara in every dry blanket he owned. He stripped off her wet clothes with trembling hands, never looking where he did not need to. Her skin was ice, her lips blue. He held her close, body to body, whispering, "Stay with me, Clara. Come back." Junie lay asleep nearby, warm and safe now, fingers curled around Clara's shawl. Luke stayed awake the entire night, feeding the fire, rubbing warmth back into Clara's limbs, whispering the same words over and over like a prayer. Please don't leave me. He did not cry, but something in his voice broke. By morning, she stirred. Her eyes blinked open slowly, unfocused. Then she saw him. Junie? She rasped. She's safe, Luke whispered, brushing damp hair from her face. Because of you. Clara swallowed hard. Her body shook. I couldn't let her go. I know, he said, his voice cracked. You didn't. His hand trembled as he touched her cheek. You saved my daughter. You could have died. Clara looked at him for a long time. I'd do it again. Luke bowed his head. For a moment he could not speak. Then, very softly, "Don't ever leave again, Clara. Don't, please." She touched his hand, weakly, her fingers curled around his. "I wasn't planning to." And for the first time, Luke did not just see a woman who had arrived by mistake. He saw someone who had chosen to stay. Someone who already belonged. When Clara woke, it was still dark outside. The fire had died down to embers, casting long, sleepy shadows along the log walls. Junie was the first to move. She had been sitting quietly by Clara's side, holding a rag doll in one hand, her little boots kicked off and forgotten by the hearth. The moment Clara stirred, Junie's eyes lit up. "Clara!" she cried, scrambling up onto the cot and wrapping both arms around her. "You woke up!" Clara, still groggy and weak, blinked as the small body pressed into her chest. "Sweetheart!" Junie pulled back just enough to look her in the eyes. "Can you be my mommy forever?" The same question. The same tiny voice. But this time, Clara did not flinch. She pulled the child close again, holding her tightly. Her arms shook, not from the cold anymore, but from the weight of something she had never dared to want. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she whispered, "Yes. Yes, baby. If you'll have me, I will." Junie nodded fiercely, as if sealing a sacred promise, and snuggled under the blanket beside her. Clara held her like she'd been born to. At the doorway, Luke stood silent. He had heard it all. He did not interrupt. He did not move. Only when Junie drifted off again did he step outside into the cold. The stars above the cabin flickered behind drifting clouds. Snow had begun to fall again, light, silent, as if the sky were blessing the earth gently, one flake at a time. After a while, Clara rose carefully from bed. She wrapped herself in a shawl and stepped out onto the porch. Her feet made soft sounds across the wooden planks. Luke stood with his back to her, hands on the railing, head bowed. His breath came in pale clouds. Clara stood beside him. They said nothing at first. Then Luke cleared his throat. "I ain't much for speeches," he said, "and I ain't got much, not like others." "Ha, boy." Clara watched him, waiting. "I didn't send that letter," he continued. "Didn't plan for this. For you." "I know," she said softly. Luke hesitated. His hand rose to rake through his hair, a nervous gesture that seemed oddly boyish. "But when I saw you holding her, when I heard what you said to her tonight," he turned to face her then. "I don't got silver rings or preacher's vows. I've got this porch, a fire that doesn't always stay lit, a fence that still needs mending." He swallowed. "But if what you want is a place to stay, if what you need is not to be alone, then I've got that. I've got this. I've got her. And I want to have you too, if you'll let me." Clara's heart tightened. Her throat ached with everything she wanted to say, but all that came out was, "Luke." He looked down, unsure, waiting for rejection. She reached for his hand. "I don't want just a porch," she said, "or a roof, or someone who lets me stay." Her fingers squeezed his, gently. "I want a family." Luke's eyes filled with something he hadn't shown anyone in years. Oh. Behind them, the door creaked open, and Junie tumbled out into the cold, bare feet on wood, her little arms flung wide. "My mommy and pa!" she shouted, spinning in a circle, laughing as the snow touched her face. Luke reached down and scooped her up, settling her between them. Clara wrapped her arms around both. And in that moment, beneath the falling snow, beneath the worn beams of the cabin porch, they weren't three broken people anymore. They were one whole thing. A family. The wind carried the scent of dry sage and sweetgrass across the open plains. It was early autumn, a year since that cold day at the train station when everything had begun, not with promises, but with a question from a little girl. Clara stood in the doorway of their cabin, one hand resting gently on her round belly. Her second child was due any day now, and her back ached in the soft way that meant life was near. Behind her, the sound of Junie's laughter rang through the house. They had made a home, not just a roof, but a rhythm. The cabin had changed. Luke had added a second room, patched the roof twice, built shelves for Clara's drying herbs and glass jars of salves. A small sign hung above the door: Ray and Harrison, herbs and help. At first, the townsfolk kept their distance. But Clara never turned anyone away. Children came first, curious and eager, asking questions about plants and books. Clara taught them their letters using pine charcoal and leftover paper. Then came the mothers, asking quietly for remedies: fevers, coughs, sleepwalkers. Then old men, asking for teas that eased aching knees. No one said half-blood anymore. They said Miss Clara, and meant it. Luke watched it all unfold with quiet reverence. He never said much to the townspeople, but he built benches outside the cabin and sharpened tools for neighbors. He was still a man of few words until Junie was involved. Then his voice turned into something else entirely: light. And today, beneath a sky streaked with amber clouds, something long overdue was happening. They were getting married. No church, no preacher, just a wide field brushed with gold grass and a handful of neighbors who had once whispered but now brought honey and cloth as wedding gifts. Clara wore a dress she had sewn herself, soft brown cotton trimmed with lace. Her hair was braided, a single feather tied near the end, like her mother had once worn. Luke waited for her beneath the sycamore tree where they had first watched Junie dance in snow. Junie ran ahead of her mother, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers and grinning from ear to ear. Luke's hands trembled as Clara approached. He had fought wars, held dying friends, faced down rifle barrels. But this made his knees weak. They stood face to face, wind catching the edges of Clara's skirt. "I do not have rings," Luke said, voice low, "and I do not have a name that ever meant safety." Clara reached out, taking his calloused hand. "I do not need safety," she said. "I just need home." Luke's eyes shimmered. She continued, voice clear for all to hear. "I used to be a woman no one chose, a girl passed over, a bride no one sent for. But today," she looked at Junie, who smiled with pride, "today I am part of a family." They kissed beneath the tree. There was no music, but Junie hummed something sweet as the sun dipped behind the hills. That night, Clara's labor began. Luke did not sleep. He paced, fetched water, boiled towels, and when the moment came, he caught his child, his son, with hands that had once only known the trigger of a gun. Clara, sweat on her brow, looked up at him. He held the baby close, tears in his beard. "You are not a mail-order bride," he whispered. "You are my choice, every day." The baby whimpered once, then nuzzled into Clara's chest. She held him, exhausted but glowing. In the morning, Junie tiptoed into the room. She clambered onto the bed beside her mother and stared wide-eyed at the swaddled bundle. Clara smiled sleepily. "Come meet your brother." Junie leaned close, gently, and kissed the baby's cheek. Then she turned to her mother. "Mama, you picked me, right?" Clara blinked. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Junie touched the baby's hand. "I wasn't born in your tummy. But you still picked me. Like him. Like Daddy picked you." Clara's heart squeezed. She pulled both children into her arms. "Yes," she said. "I chose you. Daddy chose me. And now we all choose each other. No one's left behind here." Outside, Luke was tending the garden, humming softly. The wind moved through the wildflowers they had planted around the cabin: lavender, yarrow, milkweed. From where Clara sat, she could see him bend and pull a weed, then glance toward the window. He smiled. And in that simple, quiet moment, Clara knew. This was a life no one could take from her, because it had been built not from what the world gave, but from what they chose to give each other. If this story touched your heart, if the image of a woman rejected 3 times, a child longing to be loved, and a man who thought he could never love again made your eyes well up, then don't forget to hit subscribe to Wild West Love Stories. Here we tell tales of love born between bullets and prairie winds, where hearts still find each other, even when the world turns its back. Stories not just about romance, but about finding a place to belong and becoming the family no one thought they deserved. Tap the notification bell so you never miss what comes next, because who knows, the next story might be yours. Wild West Love Stories, where wild hearts come home.